Despite the many things about my truck that I do love, there is several things that I can't stand, that drive me crazy, that constantly frustrate me and take away from the experience of driving and four-wheeling it. I'm stoked to say that I have one less thing today that has been driving me crazy. We're gonna get into it. I'm gonna show you what it was, talk about the others, and show you how I fixed it. All today on Merricks Garage. Despite the many pictures and videos that I post online showing how awesome my truck is, there are a few things that I need to be clear about. My steering has sucked for a long time. The radiator constantly leaks, and the front rattles like crazy, and I haven't been able to fix it in years. So this winter, I am going to be doing a full teardown of the front of the truck. I'm going to be pulling all the fenders off. I'm putting a new front clip on. I'm going to fix all my rattles, hopefully. I'm going to fix my steering. I'm going to fix all the leaking stuff. I'm going to weld the frame to the rocket sliders and the frame to the cage and the cage to the sliders and all that stuff and turn it into a rattle-free desert and rock killer. But that's not going to be easy. This is something I've been tackling for a long time, and no matter how many times I take apart the front end, I seem to have more rattles when I put it back together. But I have fixed the steering, and I'm super stoked. Before I jump into steering components and linkages and pitman arms, let me give you guys a quick disclaimer. I've had some braking issues too. Not that severe, but leaking. Leaking that has caused brake fluid to spill, and it's very corrosive, and so it's done a number on the paint and components on the driver's side. So when we get there, you're gonna see that it does not look very pretty. That's part of my reason for tearing everything down. I wanna get it all stripped down, I wanna get everything sealed up, and I wanna get it all painted again. So bear that in mind when you're seeing some nastiness under here. I'm aware of it. It also drives me crazy, but it is on the list to fix. The challenge with my steering has always been how to get the steering shaft, the intermediate shaft, around my coilover and down to the steering box. I've made a mount that's always worked well, but a lot of binding has come from this U-joint, which didn't really surprise me considering the rather steep angle it's at, but it was within operating angles, so I wasn't sure what the problem was. I've taken it all apart. Like I said, I've measured a ton. It's working a lot better, but it has been challenging. You can see the angles that I'm dealing with. When I began my build years ago, I recognized that the stock steering setup with the pitman arm and the drag link and the tie rod and all the stuff that came stock with this truck just wasn't going to work for what I wanted to do, push big tires. Now, I have never had any issues with any of the PSC stuff. Anything that I've had a problem with has been through my own incompetence. So I'm very happy with the components I have in the system. I'm gonna give you guys a quick run through right now as to what they are, but I am really stoked that I have found the problem. I was concerned that it might be some angulation or linkages or possibly interference from the panhard bar or who knows. It just has never worked the way it should, and I haven't been able to source the problem until now. Following the movement of fluid from the PSC reservoir, we come down and we have a supply line dropping fluid directly down into the power steering pump. That is going to be supplied by that -10, the larger line on the left-hand side. The other line is a return line coming from the cooler. The cooler is going to be delivering fluid up to the reservoir, and the reservoir will be delivering fluid down to the pump. From the pump, I have a high pressure line, a true high pressure line, delivering to the box. From the box, I have a line going over to the cooler, and obviously the cooler delivers back up to the reservoir. Coming off the box, I have my two lines, my hydraulic lines, running down to my hydraulic ram. off the ram, you can see I've got two lines. I run them simultaneously to save space and for packaging ease. And then these fire the ram that drives my tie rod. So essentially there's two steering systems on here. I have the hydraulic ram pushing the tie rod in addition to the pitman arm attached to the sector shaft of the steering box driving my drag leg. These two work in conjunction with each other. They're timed together. The stroke is matching the pitman arm swing, and we get really powerful, really strong steering from that. So this is the steering setup I've got. I've been very happy with it, apart from the binding and looseness that I felt. So they have the major components of my steering system. When they all play nicely together, you have something that works really, really well. You're not reliant on the pitman arm to move the drag link to drive that passenger wheel and then pull the driver's side wheel along with it. You have this linear actuator in the form of that hydraulic ram that's fixed to the axle tube, but also fixed to the tie rod. So it's going to fire in conjunction with the pitman arm movement. So you're going to have the pitman arm movement pushing the knuckle, and then you're going to have the ram driving the tie rod that connects the two wheels. When used together, it's a fantastic system. Once you've got the ram throw set, once you've got all your steering stops dialed in, once you've got all the air out of the system, the PSC system, and pretty much any hydraulic assist system is going to be a massive improvement over the factory setup. Now, that said, there are some considerations to make. You've got a tremendous amount of force in that ram. I think it runs between 4,000 or 6,000 PSI. So much so that I can move boulders out of the way on the trail by turning my wheels. Now, that's great when I'm moving boulders, but if I don't set up the steering system correctly, I'm going to be running into hard stops that might not be able to hold up to 4,000 PSI of turning force. So make sure that your steering stops are dialed in. Make sure that your ram throw is less than your full steering range. Otherwise, you're going to end up breaking things. The steering system at this point has been fully replaced all the way from the steering wheel down to the knuckle. Now, I didn't replace everything at once. I couldn't afford to do that. I didn't think I needed to do it. And so I think that is part of my problem, why my steering has never felt that great. And also, it's been heightened by the fact that your steering is where you get a lot of feedback from the vehicle. It's where you get road feedback. It's where you get trail feedback. You feel vibrations, you feel pulling, you feel all sorts of things through the steering wheel. And so for me, everything always felt loose, or it would bind, or just inconsistent, and it drove me up the wall. So I have replaced everything. I did fix the intermediate shaft. That has been my significant problem. That has been what's binding and leading to most of the issues. But I've also replaced my column. That was done a while ago. I replaced the factory column with an I did it column. And I've done a lot of work on bleeding the system, making sure my line runs are as good as they can be. And having steering that is literally one finger steering is fantastic. It really is cool. One of the main reasons that I am really fired up that my steering is working well is because I expected this to be a significant issue to overcome. I envision having to move that joint right there and build some sort of bracket over here to move through a double cardan U-joint down to the box. I had it built in my head to be a major undertaking. All it turned out to be was binding in this mid U-joint and a shaft, the DD collar that was intermediate shaft in place right there, was too long and was interfering with range of motion through the U-joint down low also. By measuring carefully, by looking at it 30 times, I was able to figure out what might be holding me up, and actually fixing it rather quickly, yeah, made me feel pretty good about myself. I'm doing some slight clearancing work down here on these ears, and now I'm going to move up into the yoke with the new die grinder and see if I can get myself a little bit more clearance. That is what I have got it to versus that. So I've already got myself some decent articulation out of this. with just a little bit of trimming. But let's finish it up with the die grinder and see how much we can get. I don't want to do too much because every time I'm removing metal, I'm compromising the strength of this. But if I do it properly, it should not be under any particular load. Relegating these two guys to my scrap pile. This is a Borgeson U-joint, and its failure was due to my incompetence. One of the issues I had was that the double D intermediate shaft was extending up into this joint space right here, meaning that when we articulated, which I can't really show you because this one doesn't like to do that at all anymore, it would hit the shaft before it hit the yoke, limiting my movement even more. Previously, I had this guy, which I pulled from the Junkyard XJ. It eliminated the rag joint down at the steering box and went with the U-joint instead, but the U-joint was pretty bad, and it would stick and not move very well. So fixing that and putting all new stuff in, getting it working properly, wasn't as hard as I thought. And that is my takeaway for you guys. I know a lot of this stuff can seem overwhelming and just like a massive undertaking, but eating the elephant a bite at a time works. I forced myself to take a look at this issue, to really try and understand what was the problem without just throwing time and money at it. I wanted to figure out why it was binding, where it was binding, and what I could do to fix it. After staring at it for a long time, I realized that just by lengthening the double D intermediate shaft that goes from the steering box up to my first coupler would fix my problem by reducing the severity of the angle on that U-joint. It was that kind of like put me down the path of, well, if I can fix that, that's going to alleviate that, and wouldn't you know it, it fixed it all. Now, that happens quite a lot with this build. I run into a problem, I get frustrated, I think I'm not going to be able to fix it, I sleep on it, I come back and I look at it, and I usually see it in a fresh perspective. It's taken a lot of practice. I'm usually rather impulsive. So taking my time and recognizing that there is a solution that I'm just not seeing, but it will be visible to me when I sleep on it, rest, and rethink. So I guess the moral of the story is problems are there to be solved. I look at these challenges as part of having a four-wheel drive vehicle, figuring out what works best, figuring out the best way to deploy those ideas, and then going out and testing it. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. If you haven't seen any of my other videos, go ahead and check these ones out up here, and make sure to give me a subscribe. We'll see you next week. Merricks Garage.